One is I'm thinking in terms of the semi-annual or quarterly report or equivalent from PEPFAR, et cetera, where you want to know the number of people who are on each regimen. I have the use case where I'd like to go ahead and interact between the EMR and the pharmacy and actually produce drug orders that have quantities and frequencies and stuff like that. I'd like to be able to incorporate historical data where you know they were on some regimen, but you don't know what the quantities were, or the form of the medication, and stuff like that. And the fourth is drug resistance, where I'd actually like to know from a given regimen that a person was taken, what were the types of ARVs that that person had. And then probably from a fifth point of view, where you have people rolling their own regimens, you know, what are the regimens that people have rolled and are they complete, and stuff like that. So those are my use cases.
I've got one more small, semi-nitpicky use case, which is where it would be useful for me to have a better way to add attributes to a regimen at the regimen level. So like regimen type for TB treatment, for example, standardized versus what's it called? Yeah.
We'd like to be able to see more functionality related to drug forecasting, to drug management. So drug forecasting and drug management, and also if there was a large directory of generic drug names and dosages that, you know, so that each site doesn't have to build one of its own, there might be a global one that can be downloaded and perhaps then some local additions to it.
Yesterday in one of the sessions, somebody brought up household information as well. I don't know if that's something that we're going to...
And I also want to see not just what drugs are prescribed, but also what was dispensed and picked up.
Okay, so is this something that can be split off? So is it just a question of recording regimens, or is it also a question of doing regimen suggestions and decision support? Defining them as well? Okay. So, I wonder how this is going to sound on tape.
Moderator versus participant mics.
Exactly. So does anyone else have anything they want to add sort of to that list of concerns? No? Okay. So, I mean, the first, does anyone want to sort of describe that first? I mean, the easy use case is just the idea, well, I don't know, the common use case that a lot of people are familiar with is the idea that there are like 6 standard HIV regimens that 95% of the prescriptions in a particular program are just those things checked off. That immediately becomes a little more complicated when you start thinking, well, it's actually 6 standard ones for the adults, but then the child regimens are different, and then maybe they also differ based on metadata about the patient's weight and stuff like that, as well as so there are really two aspects to this. One of them is, I think, the sort of suggesting regimens, and the other is really just recording drug orders in a group. Is that actually correct? That there are, I mean, so are these related but separate things? The idea of grouping drug orders once you have made them, and that's sort of where attributes for the whole regimen, like was it an empiric one or a standardized one or an individualized one? That's one thing, whereas saying this is the regimen we suggest, or this is the regimen that shows up as an option in the list.
All right. I see that drug grouping and drug regimens as being the two different sides. Drug regimen is what you define, saying that there's it's almost like a concept set, that there's this regimen, and it's comprised of, you know, these particular drugs, and maybe with, you know, with additional metadata, but that you're saying that this is, I'm defining what this, you know, what this regimen is. Whereas order groups is once something is ordered, saying we know these things belong together, which might go beyond just drugs. You might say that this order for this diet or this this test and this drug are all part of a group. There might be groupings that go beyond just medication.
How would you?
I guess I'm just looking forward to that. I wouldn't say that order group has only to do with drug regimens.
Okay, that's fair. Can an order group? So the question of like, is this order like a standardized versus an individualized MDR-TB regimen or treatment? Is that something you can fit into an order group?
Saying whether this is standard.
So like you
versus...
prescribe, so you prescribe 5 MDR-TB meds together,
Mhm.
and you also need to distinguish: was this standardized, meaning I did it because that's what we give everyone before we've gotten their lab results back, or this is individualized,
Or like first line, second line.
or first line, second line, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there was a property of an order group, you could pull it off that way. In most cases, I'd like to, if I know what regimens are over time, and I have that data defined somewhere, I can infer some of the information. But I realize when it comes to treatment, HIV treatment, sometimes you may give a set of drugs because it's the first line or because it's the second line. It doesn't always match up to what the definitions are, and so that to me would be a property or some additional metadata on that order group. But I would want to do it or model it in a way that it was not just an order grouping for HIV meds. We'd want to order group and one of the have some mechanism for putting an extra attribute or attributes on it.
So I don't know that I can speak to the order group issue. It may be a jump ahead, but for me, when I think of regimen, I'm thinking HIV. Don't have TB experience, okay. But when I think of regimen, I think a regimen is the active ingredients that you're actually giving, okay, and that regardless of the form and regardless of the dosage, it's the active ingredients, and that has attributes of a line, and it also has attributes of including a NERDI or an N-NERDI or a PI or whatever other means of action that a particular ARV drug might have, because that's what affects the resistance issues. Then I would take a modifier to that, I think. So if you wanted to say this is the starter regimen for this, and this is the maintenance dose for this one, or this is the above 40 kilos dose, or this is the the pediatric dose for certain size. But keep the active ingredients, I think, have to be the basis for what that is.
Active ingredients in generic sort of format?
Yeah. Active ingredients in generic format. And then you have sort of the level lower, which is what you prescribe, which is where you get to the level of, are you giving a combo? Are you giving individual pills? What is the dosage and the frequency? And then there's a layer below that, which is the actual product, okay, which is, who's the vendor, what's the lot number, and, all that kind of stuff, and what that was prescribed. Because that's the pharmacy sort of level. And I'm at a loss to say how you express these 3 different levels as OpenMRS concepts. These are just ways in different applications, but you want it to be easy for the physician to dispense the right thing, so they should be able to select a standard regimen and an adjustment to that based on the patient's characteristics, and that should be able to generate the rest.
So step 1, like the generic active ingredient. So the first level of an HIV regimen might be, 3TC, D4T plus nevirapine. And you're saying that this is something you want to be able to represent as just this.
Right.
Like this is a regimen, even if you know no more than this.
Right.
Does anyone disagree with that? So,
think we need physicians' input
Yeah.
on this.
I don't know that a regimen necessarily includes the dosages.
Right, it does not.
It's just saying we've defined these, these 3 drugs or these 2 drugs as a group, and for, between March of 2008 and April of 2009, it was called regimen, it was called starting regimen for blah. Then, to me, that's the notion of a regimen. It's a group of treatments that are combined together, and that definition is probably, is only true for some part of time.
so is that always the case?
Well, it's true for all time for when it's used, but it's not. The
If you call it
primary
regimen
regimen for
1A.
HIV is definitely something that changes over time, and you wouldn't want to be changing. Just have a definition and just change it, because then the regimen that you gave, if you refer to that regimen and you have data from a year ago, and you don't want to just change that regimen and then effectively change all the data you collected a year ago.
Well, that's where I'm talking about something to modify that. But I think that the regimen as the active ingredients is really the key for doing any sort of histories or for drug resistance. Is you really, the important thing are what are the drugs, what are the active ingredients of the drugs that were given, regardless of the form or dosage. Okay, and that's the constant information. Okay,
Well, I mean,
No.
are we referring to a regimen as like first line regimen number 1? Is that how you describe a regimen?
Yeah, I mean,
So the question is, right, so you could say that, I mean, and in fact, it is the case that like regimen 1A is this, although 1A probably actually specifies more, I'm guessing.
I think 1A specifies more than that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
I think a general principle here, which we discussed actually quite extensively in some of the meetings at WHO 2 or 3 years ago, was that this idea of naming a regimen 1A is a very tricky issue, and I think that as a policy issue, it's not something that is a good idea because of this problem of knowing what you're dealing with. And certainly in our case, we always use the ingredients in abbreviation like the 3TC, D4T, and nevirapine. I mean, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have some way of representing it, but I think that it's much more important that we get the high-level description of the ingredients correctly represented, and then we can tag that with a regimen if you want to. But as a primary thing to store regimen 1A, that to me seems like a big mistake.
right.
Right, so
yeah,
I guess
the way I would qualify that is you might say it's if the government or somebody's come out and said this is regimen 1A, what I would probably define in my dictionary would be this is 1A as defined by the government on the as of this date, or the.
No.
well, you do need to represent, I mean, if it's called 1A,
If-
you want
if
to put
there's
that label somewhere.
The danger with that is that if the data isn't all put in correctly within a certain time frame, people get confused. Was this 1A prescribed, before
Okay,
June of 2007? I think that if we do documentation where essentially one of the most valuable pieces of data about this patient is not defined accurately, that seems to be a really worrying thing.
I think maybe we're misspeaking, or we're not. I'm not being clear. The knowledge that this agency said this is our 1A regimen is, at this point in time, it's a fact. I mean, that's a concept, or that's a concept set that exists. I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to store in the order table, oh, they ordered drug regimen 1A. I would want to store the drugs they entered. And if I had some attribute on it to say they ordered this as a starting regimen, I could pull out of that. I could know from when they ordered it and what my concept definitions are. I can figure out what the regimens are.
No, I would disagree with that very much, Bert. Okay, and the reason for that is, again, I have to go with Hamish, is that you need to know the active ingredients. Okay, if you want to have
That's what's in the regimen.
No, because you're considering the active ingredients as being separate things that are joined together in a concept set called regimen, and I'm not. I'm saying we have a regimen called 3TC, D4T, NVP. That's the regimen.
I disagree with that, because you're going to have different people defining regimens differently, and so if I order those 3 drugs, I might have ordered them because of.
But we're not using this for ordering. We're not using this for ordering. We're using this for categorizing what it is that the patient has been given, okay? What we're ordering might be something different. There you might have like a convenience set that can change over time and say, okay, we're going to, you know, today 1A for low weight people is so-and-so, or 1A people for the first month is so-and-so, okay? And that's
Roger, I think you're taking a specific view of this. I think it's
right.
Actually a lot of organizations have different ways of doing it.
I understand.
What I'm trying to do is to look at where representing the fundamental data that can then be embellished with additional information and concepts for a particular organization's workflow. But I don't think, I mean, we are wanting to record orders. That's
Right.
one of the things we want to do, and we need to be able to represent that.
Right.
Now, I mean, one way we can look at that is to take each individual drug and say that the fundamental element here is the individual drug ingredient that is prescribed for this patient,
Right.
and represent that, and include in that the dosage and the guidance for administering that medication, whether it's tablet form or whatever. Another way of looking at it is to say that we have an order which links together several of those elements, so that when you say this regimen 3TC D40 nevirapine, you actually get 3 entries in the drug orders table or the observation table, depending on how you're doing it, that contain those 3 drugs and all the details. What I'm concerned about is a situation where people are encouraged to try and represent a very high-level concept, such as, you know, a numbered regimen, without there being a way of us actually also recording at that same time, what does that actually mean? Because the problem is that you then, you know, people will want to drive prescribing and dispensing from this process in some sites, probably many sites. And if there's any uncertainty about what 1A means, you probably give the patient the wrong drugs.
Well, I agree with all of that, except for the fact that in so many cases, all you have in the history is just something like 3TC-D4T NVP. Okay, that's like the only thing you can count on being there. Okay, so
are you talking history, or are you talking a new drug order?
I'm talking history.
So this is the
Okay.
past medical history of medication, not the current
drug
one.
order is history. The second is, like 2 seconds
Well,
after it's done.
well, but it's handled differently though in the typical SOAP note, right? Because with a new drug order, you know what you want to give in terms of dosage and route administration and so on. Whereas when someone says, you know, what drugs was this patient on for tuberculosis or HIV, you usually only have that high-level issue. They were on the following 3 drugs. You don't usually have. I mean, you might do, but generally you're not going to know because the patient maybe has
Yeah,
to
I
tell
think
you.
what we're saying is we want to capture not just they're ordering these 3 drugs, but they're ordering it for this purpose or this. You know, that would be the order group would capture that these 3 drugs were being ordered as a first-line regimen or as a under this pretense, and that would allow us to have richer data going back historically to say, oh well, we know not only is this person on 3 drugs, we know why, you know, that the intention of that was to do a second-line regimen, and that would be useful information. But I wouldn't want to try to have them say all I want is give them a second-line regimen, because then when I want to go through the system and say who all is on 3TC, I have a much harder time figuring out, because it becomes much messier trying to figure out who's on 3TC versus saying, okay, they're on these 3 drugs, and by the way, that is a first-line regimen, or just I'm doing this as a second-line regimen, and the knowledge of what those regimens are and what they're defined, which could change over time, it would be represented in our metadata, essentially in the concept dictionary, saying these are the regimens we know about. That can help drive in the new ordering process, giving decision support and guiding people through what they should order. Saying, oh well, we know of these different regimens, and if you just want to order the regimen, you order the regimen. If you want to order, if you need to do something funky and order separate drugs, you can order the separate drugs. And we can record, in either case, we record the drugs that were ordered. We can record whether it was done as a regimen or whether it was not. And then...
Okay.
So hold on a second.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Can I actually suggest to keep it as a concept level as you put in that my experience has been only medication management design in clinical systems, and I think it's always a dilemma of taking the secondary data of the system. But for OpenMRS, my perspective is that TB and HIV has been the priority. But remember, it's going to other regions of the world when it's not relevant in that case. Therefore, if we're keeping the concept of prescribing and ordering, then dispensing and administration, then I can assure you I spent 5 years researching that part. The ingredients and the product information, it become quite easy to follow. But as long as you can get very clear of those 3 dimensions, and I do this in experience because in Victoria we are giving designing a clinical system for medication management only. And that's exactly what the interaction we have with the medical practitioners and the government's body. Because in a sense, if we maintain the concept, which Dario has done very well there, is about prescribing, I think is the best way to secure the system, provide the right ordering information, and then within that, we can really assure that any regimen can actually obtain the right data. Because this discussion that describe obviously the different needs for the same data element, but the way you order that information model in the regimen, and I think to achieve decision support system, what Berg is saying, you have to be very clear what is the concept you're trying to represent in the system in the first place.
Sorry, what did you say the 3 dimensions were?
The dimension that we have been able to capture in more detail that is prescribing, which is within prescribing is ordering and all the drugs information. Then it's dispensing, which is basically the
Prescribing, ordering, and dispensing.
Correct. Yeah, and then administration, which is the more challenging part of it. But it have been shown that prescribing, if you get prescribing right, then you can add modules on the top.
So the thing that we haven't discussed yet is how do you represent the active ingredients of combination drugs like Trimune? And so that's an issue. when you actually prescribe that drug, do you put 3 entries in for the 3 drugs combinations, or do we actually just point to the table that actually indicates ingredients?
So one thing I would like to do is, I'm not actually sure that you guys disagree as much as it sounds like you're disagreeing. So, I wanted to sort of, what does it look like when we get to sort of the prescription level? What does the data we're storing here actually look like? And do we agree or disagree?
The order name is the first thing.
I agree that the prescribing, ordering, dispensing, 3-level analysis is a useful one, because the degree of physician control over, in some cases they'll be ordering only pretty much at the regimen level, at the prescribing level. That when it comes down to the ordering, if they have, a lot of times that's left to the pharmacy, depending on what happens to be in stock.
Correct.
As to what it is they dispense.
So to clarify, the distinction is that the prescription would be just 3-TC, D4T, NVP, BID.
Not even BID, I don't think. I mean, maybe the ordering is to say
so the prescription
BID in this strength,
It's
So the prescription has, the prescription is what? Well, it probably has the frequency. It might have specific.
It must have the frequency.
Yeah.
Prescribing must have
must have the
frequency,
frequency.
and it may have dosage if it's maybe like the high body weight dose or something like that is, you would have an extra one in there.
Yeah.
So the order then means, once you've taken that and said, and that actually means this product out of the warehouse. Is that what the?
It means what the doctor wants the patient to
From a system point of view, though, that order have to have a name, a frequency, and it's actually quite defined elements for prescribing for the system point of view.
Oh, sorry. So, but the idea.
But let's take when you say that, are you saying, for example, the choice of a combination drug versus 2 separate prescriptions?
I'm talking about the actual data elements for the prescribing part of it. When you look the order, then you look those elements of the ingredients of the actual prescribing.
Okay.
So they are different elements. I'm just talking about a part of the OpenMRS breakout of the data elements, what I'm trying to contribute here.
Okay, so when you say an order, okay, would you distinguish between an order that used a combination drug and an order that used 3 separate?
It depends.
Can we actually?
Hey, I'm
Can we go
actually
back
meant to
to
be doing the
stuff and-
timekeeping here, and we're running out
Yeah.
of time. So first of all, I think it's important that we open this up
Right.
to other
Correct.
questions. So is there anybody else who'd like to comment at this point? we've had a little kind of a personal conversation at this point.
You mean on this point, so?
Yeah, alternate.
More-
The other
more
thing I would
generally.
like to do is understand what these mean. But
How about like later on, for example, WHO changed the guideline and changed the dosage, even though keep the same active ingredients, how are we going to handle in terms of concept?
Any other comments or questions either about these particular
So,
issues or more broadly?
I feel like well, go ahead, but I feel like we actually need, at least I don't understand what this looks like. 8 minutes? So what I would like to get out of the next 8 minutes is, in this simple case, what does the prescription look like? What is the order and what's the dispensing?
Did you want to make a quick comment?
We have the drug order.
We have one more comment there, is what we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know whether this is like similar to the discussion, but one thing I would like to see is how we define drugs that have been prescribed and of those which have been dispensed and some that may be dispensed even though they have not been prescribed. And also if it would be possible to link the drugs as broadly as looking at the ingredients that they contain to specific like branding, so that that can be linked to stocks, for example.
So one thing I wanted to comment on is that as the user interface works in OpenMRS right now, the things that are stored in the drug order table are actually prescriptions, I think, as we're discussing them here.
Yeah.
So that's wrong. I suppose that's wrong.
Why?
Well, I mean, that may or may not be wrong. So,
Yeah,
which
I mean,
is why I would, well.
The EMR, what OpenMRS is trying to be is the electronic medical record. Its focus is what we want to have concepts that define what these entities are. What are these treatments? What are the different drugs that can be given? We want to have order sets defining panels of orders that may go beyond drugs and tests. You may say, I've got a patient coming in with pancreatitis. Pull up the pancreatitis order set, and I get all the common drugs and tests that I would do for that patient. And that same pattern can be used to say, I have a HIV patient that I'm starting, and what's the starting regimen I should give them? Well, we can pull that out of an order set, and so there's data defining decision support and content guiding how we guide the provider to prescribe, and then once they are in the ordering process and say, okay, well now given these choices, I want to prescribe these 5 things, or I want to prescribe everything. That action that they wanted to order that goes into our order tables, and the orders, there'll be orders that are for tests, there'll be orders that are for drugs. I think there's value in the order grouping to allow us to do more than what a lot of order systems do, that just get the orderables, say that there's these drugs that were ordered. We might be able to enhance that with order grouping to say these were ordered as part of a regimen and have some extra smarts there. But the notion of when it would, how many were dispensed and what the stock, what the stocking, and that starts to become the scope of a pharmacy system. And I think there is some value in us potentially being able to pull in some dispensing information, whether it goes in the order table or that gets linked in as observational information about the patient, or where we decide to put that in the EMR, we could debate. But the actual what's my stock and what am I going to pull out, that starts to go into what I would hope would be the realm of the best open source pharmacy system we can find.
And I guess I'd like to say that the order set name maybe is where the 1A comes in, because that's changeable, okay? But to just be descriptive of the regimen. The other thing that's useful to know is the number of days of that regimen that you're trying to describe.
Yeah,
okay.
So
That's
where you
get to the actual order.
Sure.
But instead of working backwards from that, I know the European system has like, okay, well here's a standard, and that basically includes what the daily dose is, so you can go backwards. But I don't know that the administration practices are good enough that we can go backwards from that and figure out how many days the physician is trying to prescribe based on the actual quantities that he did in fact prescribe.
I'd like to just comment on that one of the ways that we handle that is to either have the notion that you have a duration of a prescription. So if somebody comes in with pneumonia, you might give them 5 days of amoxicillin 500 milligrams 3 times a day, and you specifically say that it's a 5-day course. Whereas on the other hand, if you're prescribing for HIV, then you start someone on Trimune, that's going to be a lifetime regimen until, or if something happens that requires you to change your second-line regimen. So then the duration is what happened in the end when they finally stopped that drug. And that you need those two notions. But I think perhaps one way to look at this is that there are higher level abstractions where you might just need to know the names of drugs, but there are times when you need to know the very precise details of the dose, the number of doses given per day, even whether those doses were different. So unfortunately, you have to kind of be able to represent those details and even potentially the specific preparation of that drug. But at other times, you need a very high-level description. And I think perhaps the goal here is to have a data model that's rich enough to represent the details of a really, pernickety kind of prescription, and then not populate all of that necessarily, or have an order set which includes, a standard way of prescribing that, which the physician can modify or could just go with.
What I've envisioned, as a target would be to have, and we already, I think, in drug order table have many of these elements of the duration, the frequency, the dosage, and there can be things like route. There can be whether it's brand, if this is brand specific or not. There's a lot of details you can get into a prescription, specific for drug prescriptions. But in my mind, the ultimate is to have that coded element have a space for the complex order that we can't simply code into those values. Maybe we can make estimates in them, but the truth is it's too complex to handle. I want to give warfarin, 4 milligrams on this, day and 5 milligrams on that day, and then increase it by 2 milligrams for 2 days and then bring it back. You can get into various orders that start to break that system, and so the notion would be, I would like clinicians to come to an OpenMRS terminal and have a content there that says, oh, you want to order, this patient has pneumonia, you want to order amoxicillin. Here is a standard way to order amoxicillin, and we usually do it for 10 days, but you can change it to 7 or 14 if you want. And we use content in the system to make that a one choice option. And behind the scenes in that content that we know we're presenting them, this is amoxicillin 500, TID, whatever. We have the coded elements behind the scenes so that it's just a quick one-pick choice for the provider, and then we get the rich, coded content underneath it, and that would be it.
So in the OpenMRS context, do we need the distinction between the prescription and the order? And what is that distinction? So I've sort of written up that a prescription would be something like 3-TCD, 14 of Aripine, twice a day, starting today, no end date, for HIV as a first-line regimen. Is that all?
In my world, the prescription is an order.
I think you need the quantities and also day supply or something like this, don't you think?
Yeah.
But, no, see, I think that's, if you're looking at something like an IMAI point of view, okay, it's a lot different from if you're working in a first world hospital, coming up with a custom tailored, dealing with a pneumonia case or something like that, where you have a taper up, taper down, or steroids or something like that, where you've got lots of details. To me, that has to be an order line, okay? And if you want to have an order set that makes that easy to select, okay, I think that's great. But certainly for doing something like ART monitoring for drug resistance, the important thing is what were the active ingredients and how many days did you try to prescribe them for, so we can see if the patient ran out of drugs or not based on their record.
Well, I think that your point is good, that we need to be able to extract that kind of data for doing surveillance and monitoring and research and so on. But the question here, I think, is really that what is the maximum detail we need to represent? So even in the IMAI approach, even if you prescribe, very generic kind of triimmune for, unlimited length of time, just, very simple prescription. The problem is you also have the pediatric patients, and they need the most excruciating detail of weight-based dosing, and in MDR-TB it gets even worse actually. You have 6 or 8 drugs, and the dose changes up to 14 different increments. And so the problem is that we actually do have a very sophisticated first world problem that in many cases can be abstracted into something simple, but in those small percentage of cases, or maybe a high percentage in MDR-TB, really do require that sophistication, and that's the challenge, I think.
So I just want to point out that our timekeeper has been negligent. That's you, not the guy behind you.
2 minutes.
So
2 minutes over.
we are over. We're over time. I don't feel emotionally satisfied that like I answered all my questions. I don't know if other people do. So I guess I would like to sort of try to continue this discussion with whoever wants to continue at some ad hoc session later. I'm really for me, I think probably the first important question to answer is, do we need this distinction between a prescription and an order? I don't want anyone to try to answer that right now. Because I've heard you start talking.
It's a very strong views, this one, isn't it?
I'm going to pay for that later.
Right, and we haven't even gotten to dispensing, so we'll need to
We're going to dispense
reconvene.
the diazepam before this issue is discussed.
Does anyone have any short commentary?
I have a quick question. Can we do the drugs order on the form now instead of on the dashboard?
So, right now, no, you cannot order drugs either from InfoPath or HTML or XForms.
You can fix that.
It's something we
Because
intend.
we cannot take advantage of the orders on the form.
I have a question on, does it make sense to split that out into a small module or something that represents a map? That you could actually do what is in the global properties right now, you could actually put that together in like a little design element. That makes sense for that.
So the question is, does it make sense to split off what's currently the orders tab into a module that allows different people to customize it differently, or that allows you to use it in other places?
Not really both.
Both.
I mean, I can see that different people would want.
Yeah, I think where we need to get to is that you need to be able to do whatever these things are. You need to be able to place these orders or prescription from these forms.
Putting ordering into a module has other benefits because we could have 3 different ways of.
Right. There's like the simple ordering and the very complex ordering.
How does iDot fit into all this?
How does iDart fit?
It's the pharmacy system that does the dispensing.
So
So these things are the same thing, and this is handled by the pharmacy system.
Okay, all right.
well.
But you could, for
I
example,
would argue that. Sorry.
So some say that OpenMRS ends here, and this is the, pharmacy system.
But if you don't have iDart, you can have an OpenMRS module that gives you some of that functionality.
Right. Or you
But would
could-
never be as awesome as iDart.
or you could have a module that's like iDart aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what Ryan has really at the moment. Ryan, that you've actually created a dispensing order in OpenMRS, and then it sends it out through Mirth to iDart. But you could have just had dispensed that order from OpenMRS with some
Is
modifications.
that available? Is that, where is that?
Well,
I
it's
think
something
he's
we're
talking about it in the session that you just missed because you came to this one.
really?
I don't know. Is that what? No, that's probably not what that might be what the Mirth
Okay.
section.
Yeah, now we're starting the next section.
All right. So, unfortunately, we're gonna have to wrap this up right now.
We'll put this up on the wiki for discussion.
Did you get all this?
Yeah.
Do you have all the answers too? Because that would be cool.
Awesome.
How's your typing skills?
Question mark. Yes.
Don't
There
let
you
Bert type
go.
it up because then he'll change all the answers. He's gonna offer, but don't let him.